The slap echoed across the palace courtyard like thunder splitting the sky. Princess Ada's hand had moved so fast that even King Okafor, a man who had witnessed wars, famines, and the rise and fall of kingdoms, couldn't process what he'd just seen. His son, Collins, stood frozen on the red clay ground, one hand gripping a wooden crutch, the other touching his reddening cheek. The crowd of thousands gasped in unison, a wave of shock rippling through bodies adorned in their finest wrappers and gold jewelry. "You want me to marry this?" Ada's voice cut through the silence like a blade through silk. She turned to King Okafor, her eyes blazing with a fury that made even the palace guards step back. This stinking bastard. This good-for-nothing son of yours. But to understand how we arrived at this moment, at Princess Ada's hand connecting with Collins's face with enough force to shock a king, we must go back 3 weeks. Back to when the village still believed in fairy tales and happy endings. 3 weeks earlier, King Okafor stood before his people in the village square, raising his royal staff as his voice thundered across the crowd. "My people, I bring you joyous news." The villagers pressed closer, eager for whatever their beloved king had to share. King Okafor, respected across the region, continued with pride swelling in his chest. "My son, Collins, your prince, is returning home. And not just to visit, but to be crowned in our traditional ceremony and to choose a wife from among our people." Cheers exploded. Prince Collins had built an empire in Lagos and become the success story every parent wished for their children. The king lifted a large photograph of him, tall, handsome, confident, and impossibly charming. Women gasped, some clutching their chests, others whispering prayers. A wildfire of excitement swept through the region. By evening, neighboring villages had heard. By morning, distant princesses were traveling toward Okafor's kingdom. Homes buzzed with preparations. Women studied Collins's photograph like a divine revelation. Some made copies to sleep beside. One young woman whispered to her picture, "I'll be a good wife. Just choose me." A lonely widow borrowed money for beauty treatments, convinced she still had a chance. Mothers coached daughters. Tailors worked day and night. Churches overflowed with prayers, "Lord, let him pick me." Fearing chaos, King Okafor gathered the elders. "We must bring order," he declared. He selected the 10 most beautiful and accomplished women to live in the palace until Collins arrived. Those chosen were celebrated like queens, pampered and prepared for greatness. But none of them knew Collins had his own plan. In his Lagos penthouse, Collins read headlines, "Billionaire Prince returns to choose bride." Comments stung him. He deserves only the finest woman. No simple village girl is good enough. His jaw tightened. He understood human nature too well. That night, he called his father. "Dad, we need to talk about how I'm arriving tomorrow." Collins explained everything, his shocking plan, the disguise, the intention behind it. King Okafor listened in silence, his excitement fading into concern. "Son, this will humiliate us. People will laugh." "I know," Collins said calmly. "That's the point." After a long pause, King Okafor agreed, though uneasily. Queen Amora later found him sitting in the dark. "What troubles you?" she asked. "Our son returns tomorrow," he whispered, "and it will not be easy." The morning of Collins's arrival turned the entire village into a festival ground. Thousands of women, locals, visitors, even princesses from distant kingdoms, lined the streets in their finest clothes, dripping in jewelry, painted in bright makeup, each one hoping to be the future queen. The 10 selected women stood in the palace courtyard, dressed by professional stylists, glowing with confidence. "He will choose one of us today," one whispered. Music filled the air as everyone waited for the royal convoy. Then a dusty, aging SUV appeared, no luxury cars, no escort. "That can't be him," someone muttered. But the vehicle drove straight into the palace courtyard. When the door opened, a man stepped out who looked nothing like the polished prince from the photograph. His clothes were worn and faded, his hair wild, his beard untrimmed. He leaned heavily on a wooden crutch, one leg clearly weak. Yet his face was unmistakable. It was Collins. A wave of gasps rolled through the crowd. The 10 beautiful women froze, their smiles collapsing. The elders stared in disbelief. Queen Amora covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. King Okafor, though warned of the plan, still felt his pride shatter as he looked at the crowd's horrified faces. Collins hobbled forward, the crutch scraping loudly. Instead of admiration, the crowd parted with disgust and disappointment. "Daddy, I'm back," he said softly. King Okafor roared for all to hear. "What have you done? You have humiliated this family." Princess Ada, standing closest, recoiled as though she'd seen a monster. "You want me to marry this?" she shouted at the king. When Collins approached her gently, she slapped him across the face with a force that silenced the entire courtyard. The king's mouth opened, but no words came. In 40 years of ruling, no one had ever spoken to him this way. And certainly not in front of his entire kingdom. Ada pointed her manicured finger at both the king and queen, her jewelry catching the harsh Lagos sun. "Don't you ever invite me to such an embarrassing occasion again. My father will hear about this insult." She swept past Collins, her bodyguards forming a protective wall around her as she disappeared into a waiting convoy. The dust from her departure hung in the air like shame made visible. One by one, the women began to leave. "I spent my entire savings on this dress," one woman spat, loud enough for everyone to hear. "And this is what we get. A disabled man who looks like he crawled out of a gutter." Another laughed bitterly. That princess gave him exactly what he deserved. A dirty slap for a dirty trick. "How will I return the money I borrowed?" a widow whispered to her friend, tears streaming down her face. "I told everyone I was going to marry a prince. Now I'm going home with nothing but shame." The palace that had been bursting with thousands just minutes ago emptied like water from a broken pot. King Okafor stood motionless, watching his reputation drain away with each departing guest. Without a word, he turned and walked toward his chambers, his royal robes suddenly feeling heavy as chains. Collins followed, his crutch tapping against the marble floors. His mother, Queen Amora, trailed behind them, her face streaked with tears. Inside the royal chamber, the air was thick with tension. King Okafor sat on his bed, his head in his hands. For the first time in his son's life, Collins saw his father look small, defeated. "Dad," Collins said softly, still gripping his crutch. The king didn't look up. "Dad," Collins repeated, this time with more force. "Is that the woman you wanted me to marry?" Finally, Okafor raised his head. His eyes were red, but not from tears, from rage barely contained. "She was so nice to me on the phone," Collins continued, his voice steady despite the handprint still visible on his face. "Sweet words every night. Promises of loyalty. Dreams of our future together." He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. "But she slapped me in front of you. Insulted you. Disrespected this entire kingdom. Is that the kind of woman you wanted as your daughter-in-law?" The king's jaw tightened. Queen Amora stepped forward, her tears now replaced with understanding. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. You two planned this, didn't you? Collins nodded slowly. And this is the result. Imagine if I had married such a woman, Dad. This kingdom would fall before you even joined the ancestors. King Okafor stood up, his royal bearing returning like a tide. He walked to his son and placed both hands on his shoulders. How long will you keep this up? Until I find a good woman for this kingdom, Collins said firmly. But expect more from those 10 strangers you brought to this house. He turned to both parents. Make sure you play your roles very well. The king's lips curved into a smile, the first genuine one in years. Son, you've made me see what I was blind to. The phone calls, the flattery, the promises. I thought they were signs of genuine interest. But they were just hunting for a crown. Queen Amora wiped her face. The village is going to talk about this for generations. Let them, Collins said, adjusting his crutch. Truth has a way of revealing itself. We just need patience. Outside the palace walls, the village burned with gossip. Can you believe we wasted time on that pit toilet of a prince? One woman said to her friends at the market, her voice dripping with disgust. Disabled and poor-looking. I should have stayed home. That Princess Ada gave him what he deserved, another added, laughing. That slap was so hard, I'm surprised his head didn't spin. At the beer parlor in Sarulir, men gathered to dissect the disaster. My sister came back crying, one said, shaking his head. She borrowed money for that dress. Now the woman she borrowed from is demanding payment. How will she explain that the prince is a disgrace? I heard some women are staying in the palace, another man whispered. The desperate ones. They're eating free food and enjoying air conditioning while pretending they still want to marry him. Back at the palace, the remaining 4 women gathered in the guest quarters, their faces a mixture of calculation and contempt. I'm going back to my boyfriend, one announced, standing up. This was a complete waste of my time. Me? I'm staying, another said, examining her nails. Free food, free accommodation, spa treatments, massages. I'll be treated like a princess even if I'm not marrying one. And when I leave here, I'll be so healthy and beautiful that real men, rich men, will notice me. 2 more women left that night, called back by embarrassed parents who couldn't bear the shame of having their daughters associated with the disabled prince. Only 4 remained. And they treated Collins like he was invisible. The next afternoon, Collins found one of the women outside, tending to her makeup by the palace fountain. Good afternoon, he said politely, leaning on his crutch. She didn't respond. I just wanted to say. What do you want? She cut him off without looking up. I thought maybe we could talk. Get to know each other. Be friends. Now she looked at him, her eyes cold as ice. Friends. With you. She laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. I can't be friends with a low-class prince. Look at yourself. She gestured at his worn clothes, his unkempt hair, his crutch. This life is not meant for disabled men like you. Leave me alone. Before Collins could respond, the other 3 women appeared, drawn by the commotion like vultures to carrion. Is he bothering you? One asked, smirking. The disabled prince wants to make friends, the first woman announced, and they all erupted in laughter. Collins stood there, absorbing their mockery like rain. Each cruel word, each dismissive glance, each burst of laughter, he catalogued them all in his memory. I can't marry a disabled man, one declared loudly. My children would be ashamed of their father. When Collins asked them to help wash his clothes, they insulted him. When he requested they cook, they ordered the palace maid to do it, then pretended the food was theirs. They treated him like a burden they were forced to endure for the sake of palace comfort. Every night, Collins reported back to his father. 2 of the women who left are already pregnant, he revealed one evening, sitting across from the king in his private chamber. Imagine if I had married either of them. We would be raising another man's son, blood that isn't ours. That would be the end of our legacy. King Okafor was speechless for a long moment. Finally, he spoke, his voice heavy with realization. I see everything now. This generation is different from mine. I should have taken precautions. The women you brought here, Collins continued, I've tested them all. They're useless. But keep them for now. Why? Collins's eyes glinted with something dark and knowing. I want to see them regret when the time comes. The king laughed, a real laugh that echoed through the chamber. Son, you are a very smart man. Father, it's time to go out and search. Will you carry those crutches with you, or will you drop them? Collins smiled. I'll take them with me. I need to finish where I started. But while Collins was testing women, vultures were circling the throne. 3 days later, a delegation of elders marched into the throne room. Chief Okoro led them, his walking stick tapping against the floor like a countdown to doom. My king, Okoro began, his voice smooth as palm oil but laced with poison. Now that we know your son is disabled, we must face reality. A disabled man cannot represent us. He cannot become prince. King Okafor's fists clenched. Collins is my son and my heir. Not anymore, another elder interrupted. We are implementing a new tradition. If you cannot provide a healthy heir within 6 months, the traditional crowning period, you will step down. And Chief Okoro will take over the throne. The words hit like a thunderclap. This is not our tradition. Okafor roared, standing from his throne. It is now, Okoro said calmly. We cannot have a handicapped person rule over healthy, able people. It's an insult to our ancestors. Some elders stood loyal to the king, but too many sided with Okoro. The division was clear, deadly. Chief Okoro will be our next king, one elder declared. Whether you like it or not. After they left, Okoro didn't waste time. He mobilized the youth, the women's groups, the market associations. He spread his message like wildfire, no handicapped prince. No weak king. Protests erupted in the village square. People who had worshipped at King Okafor's feet now called for his removal. Women who had desperately wanted to marry Collins now blocked others from even considering it. That night, the royal family gathered in the inner chambers. There's always been a rat among them, King Okafor said, surprisingly calm. Our plan just exposed them faster than I expected. Dad, what are you going to do about this? Collins asked. You handle the women problem. I'll handle Okoro. The king's eyes were steel. But you must get a bride before 6 months. I want them to lose when they think they're winning. Queen Amora shook her head. The women have turned against me too. I don't know what Okoro has promised them, but that man is desperate. Mother, do you remember those 2 pregnant women who left? Collins asked quietly. Yes. It was Chief Okoro's son who impregnated them. The king shot to his feet. That bastard. That treacherous snake was trying to plant his bloodline in this palace. That man is evil, the queen whispered. We must be careful. He could try anything now, poison, sabotage, assassins. From now on, the king declared, you cook all our food yourself. Only one trusted staff member can help. If Okoro tried to infiltrate through pregnancy, he can get to us through our food. The walls were closing in. But Collins had one more move to make. Every day, Collins walked through the village with his crutch, enduring mockery. Women turned their backs when they saw him. Parents pulled their daughters away as if disability were contagious. The same people who had lined the streets to welcome him now cursed his existence. "It's a waste of time to be with a disabled prince whose family will be dethroned," one woman said loudly as he passed. "My daughter will not throw her life away on a sinking ship," a father declared, pulling his teenage daughter behind him. Collins absorbed it all. Every insult. Every rejection. Every cruel laugh. Until he saw her. She was collapsed on the roadside near the market, thin, frail, her clothes torn and dirty. People stepped over her like she was garbage. No one stopped. No one cared. Collins knelt beside her, his crutch falling to the ground. "Sister, can you hear me?" She opened her eyes, beautiful eyes in a face marked by suffering. "Please," she whispered. "I'm so hungry." He lifted her, supporting her weight despite his disability, and carried her to his car. The few people who noticed looked away. Why would a disabled prince care about a homeless girl? At the private hospital in Lekki, doctors examined her. Malnutrition. Exhaustion. But she would survive. When she woke up the next day, Collins was sitting beside her bed. "Who are you?" she asked, confused by the care in his eyes. "A friend." "What's your name?" "Sandra." "Sandra, you're safe now. Rest." Before he left, she stopped him. With trembling hands, she removed a pendant from her neck, a simple, beautiful piece that looked ancient. "Please, take this. It's all I have to thank you." For the first time since returning home, Collins felt something shift in his chest. This woman, who had nothing, wanted to give him everything. "Keep it safe for me," he said gently. "When you're better, you can give it to me yourself." He brought her to the palace. When the 4 remaining women saw her, their laughter was instantaneous and vicious. "A poor man with a poor woman," one shrieked. "Perfect match, 2 beggars together. She probably has diseases. Keep her away from us." But Sandra was different. Where the palace women were cruel, she was kind. Where they complained, she helped. She assisted the queen in the kitchen, told jokes that made the king laugh for the first time in weeks, and treated Collins like he was worth something. And slowly, impossibly, they fell in love. While love bloomed in the palace, ambition festered in Chief Okoro's compound. His children started calling themselves prince and princess. Men and women begged to be in their favor. Marriage proposals flooded in from distant communities. Everyone wanted to align with the future ruling family. Okoro's daughter, Chine, began wearing designer clothes to the market, her nose perpetually in the air. "When my father becomes king," she told anyone who would listen, "I'll remember who was loyal and who wasn't." His son, Emeka, drove through the village in a new Lexus SUV, bought on credit, but no one knew that. He honked at people to clear the road, treating farmers and traders like obstacles to his destiny. Okoro himself walked through the village like a god, distributing money and promises with theatrical generosity. At the town square, he'd gather crowds and paint pictures of a golden future. "When I'm king," he announced at every gathering, his voice booming with false righteousness, "I will build schools in every ward. Not 1, not 2, 5 schools. Empower widows with monthly stipends. Develop this community into a city that rivals Lagos itself. Paved roads. Electricity 24 hours. Clean water in every home." The people cheered, their eyes glazed with the promise of prosperity. King Okafor had his chance, Okoro continued, his words carefully crafted to wound. 40 years he's ruled, and what do we have? Cracked roads. Epileptic power. And now, a disabled heir who can't even walk properly. Is this the future you want for your children? No, the crowd roared. The youth president, a young man named Chidi who had once sworn loyalty to King Okafor, now stood beside Okoro like a faithful dog. Chief Okoro understands our generation, Chidi declared to his peers. He promises jobs, not empty traditions. Progress, not outdated customs. Market women sang Okoro's praises, their voices harmonizing in the afternoon heat. Even some royal guards, men who had eaten from King Okafor's table for decades, began visiting Okoro's compound at night, their loyalty corroded by promises of better positions in the new administration. But inside the palace, Collins watched it all with the patience of a chess master. His overplaying his hand, Collins observed one evening, standing at his window overlooking the village square where Okoro was holding yet another rally. King Okafor joined his son, his face grave. The people believe him. Let them, Collins said quietly. A man who builds his house on lies will watch it collapse on his own head. We just need to wait. And if they storm the palace, the queen asked, genuine fear in her voice. Some of those youth are angry enough to do anything. They won't, Collins assured her. Because in 3 weeks, everything changes. Sandra entered the room, carrying a tray of food she'd prepared herself, another precaution against poison. Collins is right. My father arrives in 3 weeks with documentation that will prove Collins's legitimacy and other things. Other things? King Okafor raised an eyebrow. Sandra smiled mysteriously. Let's just say Chief Okoro isn't the only one who knows how to investigate. My father has connections in Lagos, Abuja, even internationally. When we're done, the village will know exactly who Chief Okoro really is. The 6-month deadline approached like an execution date, and the village's anticipation reached a fever pitch. Okoro's compound had become a pilgrimage site. People brought gifts, seeking favor with the future king. Children played games in the street, pretending to be King Okoro, ordering their friends around with exaggerated authority. Traders sold merchandise, t-shirts with Okoro's face, wrappers printed with New Dawn, New King. The 4 women still living in the palace grew more vicious toward Sandra. Look at her, cooking like a common maid, one sneered, watching Sandra help in the kitchen. She thinks she's special because the disabled prince talks to her, another added. When Okoro becomes king, we'll all be sent away anyway. Might as well enjoy the show. But Sandra never responded to their cruelty. She'd learned something they hadn't, that dignity doesn't require an audience, and true power whispers while weakness shouts. One night, 2 weeks before the wedding date, Collins found Sandra sitting alone in the palace garden, staring at the stars. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, sitting beside her without his crutch. They were alone, so the pretense wasn't necessary. "I was thinking about the first time you saw me," Sandra said softly. "On that street, dying slowly while the world walked past. Do you know how many people saw me that day? How many? Hundreds. Maybe thousands. Men in expensive cars. Women in beautiful clothes. Young people with their whole lives ahead of them. All of them saw me. And all of them chose to see nothing." Collins took her hand. "But you gave me your pendant. Why? You didn't know who I was." "Because kindness recognized kindness," Sandra replied, her eyes glistening. "You were dressed like you had nothing, walking with a crutch, and yet you stopped. You saw me not as an obstacle or an embarrassment, but as a person. That's when I knew. Knew what? That whoever you really were, you were worth saving too. Collins pulled her close, and they sat in silence, two people who had found each other in a world obsessed with appearances. And then Sandra asked to bring her relatives for the wedding. The day arrived heavy with expectation. Chief Okoro mounted a magnificent horse, dressed in garments that cost more than most villagers earned in a year. Hundreds of people followed him to the palace, a triumphant parade of a king in waiting. King Okafor. Okoro's voice boomed across the courtyard. Your time is finished. Step down. No handicapped prince will rule us. The crowd echoed his words. Step down. Step down. Step down. King Okafor stood on the palace steps with Queen Amora and Collins. They looked calm. Too calm. Then the convoy arrived. 10 sleek vehicles, Range Rovers, Mercedes-Benzes, and a Rolls-Royce that made even Okoro's expensive horse look like a donkey. The crowd fell silent. A woman emerged from the lead vehicle, and the world seemed to tilt. Sandra. But not the Sandra they knew. This Sandra wore a gown that shimmered like liquid gold. Her hair was styled by professionals. Diamonds glittered at her throat and wrists. She moved with the grace of someone born into power. Behind her, a man stepped out, tall, distinguished, wearing traditional royal attire that made even King Okafor look humble. Sandra walked straight to King Okafor and knelt. Your Majesty, please forgive my deception. The king smiled, the smile of a man who had just won a war. There is nothing to forgive, my daughter. This is my father, Sandra said, gesturing to the distinguished man. King Adebayo of Lagos Island. A sitting king and international businessman. The 4 palace women who had mocked Sandra grabbed each other for support. Their faces drained of color. Sandra stood and walked to Collins. She reached down and gently removed his crutch, her eyes dancing with knowing joy. I know you're not disabled, she said loud enough for everyone to hear. Shall we proceed and get married now? Collins straightened to his full height, strong, whole, commanding. The transformation was electric. Chief Okoro's mouth hung open like a broken gate. The elders who had supported him looked at each other in horror. The youth president who had pledged allegiance suddenly found the ground fascinating. Okoro's children, dressed in their royal clothes, looked like they wanted the earth to swallow them. The women who had rejected Collins began weeping, harsh, ugly sobs of regret. The wedding that followed was legendary. Senators arrived. Business moguls. Politicians who controlled the country's purse strings. Money sprayed until the ground was carpeted in naira notes. And through it all, Collins and Sandra smiled at each other, two people who had seen the worst of humanity and chosen to believe in each other anyway. 3 days later, a summons went out. Chief Okoro, the treacherous elders, and the youth president were called to the throne room. King Okafor sat on his throne with Collins standing beside him, no crutch, no pretense, all prince. You are hereby stripped of your titles, the king declared. Chief Okoro, you are punished for treason and rebellion against your rightful king. Your lands are confiscated. Your privileges revoked. Okoro's mouth opened, but no words came. The man who had walked like a god now looked like a beggar. The elders who supported this rebellion, Collins continued, his voice sharp as a sword, will serve the kingdom through community labor for 2 years. Every school you promised to build, you will now build with your own hands. Your Majesty, please, one elder begged. Silence. King Okafor's voice shook the walls. You wanted to dethrone me over my son's supposed disability. You believed lies over loyalty. You chose greed over honor. Now you will learn the cost of betrayal. That evening, the royal family gathered for dinner: King Okafor, Queen Amora, Collins, and Sandra. I still can't believe it worked, the Queen said, laughing as she served jollof rice. It had to, Collins replied, squeezing Sandra's hand. I needed to see who truly loved me and who loved the crown. And those 4 women? Sandra asked, though her smile said she already knew their fate. Left this morning, the Queen answered. Crying so hard the guards thought someone had died. Someone did, King Okafor said quietly. Their greed died. Their arrogance died. Their cruelty died. He looked at his son with pride that could light up the Lagos night. You taught them what I could not, that character cannot be faked, and truth always reveals itself. Sandra touched the pendant around her neck, the one Collins had told her to keep safe. When you helped me on that street, I knew you were special. Not because you were a prince, but because you saw me when everyone else looked away. That's because I was looking for someone who could see me too, Collins said softly. Not the crown. Not the palace. Just me. Queen Amora wiped tears from her eyes. To think we almost let you marry Princess Ada. The family erupted in laughter, the kind of laughter that heals wounds and builds futures. Outside the palace, the village that had rejected Collins now celebrated him. The same voices that had called for his removal now sang his praises. The same women who had mocked him now told their daughters, if only you had been patient, you could have been princess. But inside, where it mattered, 4 people sat around a table knowing something the village would never understand. True royalty isn't about crowns or thrones or titles passed down through blood. True royalty is about character tested in fire and love proven through sacrifice. The slap that had echoed across the courtyard 6 months ago still rang in their memories, not as a symbol of shame, but as the first note in a symphony of redemption that would play for generations. And when Collins looked at Sandra, he knew with certainty that sometimes you have to pretend to be broken to find someone who sees you as whole. The crutch sat in a corner of the room now, a reminder of a test passed and a lesson learned. Tomorrow, Collins would be officially crowned as prince, with Sandra as his princess. But tonight, they were just 4 people sharing a meal, bound not by blood or tradition, but by something far more powerful. The truth that had been hiding in plain sight all along. But the question remains, how many of us would have been like Princess Ada, choosing the appearance of wealth over the reality of character? How many would have been like Sandra, seeing value where others saw worthlessness? And when tested, would we reveal our true selves, or would the mask we wear become the prison we deserve?